A whistle shatters the night air. 10 men in silver and black sprint into the floodlights, hearts hammering, bones already bruised. They know each collision might cost an arm, a season, maybe even a life. Yet they charge ahead again and again. Why? Because that's what it means to be a Raider. Welcome back, Gridiron historians. In the next few minutes, you'll uncover 10 fearless Raiders who gambled everything for the game. Not just wins and records, these stories dig deeper. You'll hear about the center who played after 70 surgeries, the safety whose hits were so brutal they rewrote league rules, and the running back who faced down an army of concussions but never slowed. We'll dive into hidden hospital reports, forgotten sideline dramas, and the secret operation that saved a life mid-season. Stick around till the end, because the last Raider on our list made a sacrifice so shocking it still shapes player safety today. Miss it, and you'll miss the twist that turns this whole saga on its head. If you crave grit, honor, and raw human courage, you're in the right place. This is History of Raiders, where legends never fade. Smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss another untold tale from football's dark side. Let's get started. Jim Otto was not just a football player. He was a machine wrapped in muscle and metal. For 15 grueling seasons, from 1960 to 1974, Otto anchored the offensive line for the Oakland Raiders. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't loud, but he was always there. Rain, mud, pain, it didn't matter. He started in 210 straight games, never once missing a single one. That number jumps to 308 games if you count playoffs and exhibition matchups. It's not just a record, it's a symbol of a man who refused to quit no matter the cost. And the cost was staggering. By the time Otto retired, his body was more steel than skin. Over the years, he endured more than 70 surgeries, mostly on his knees and joints. Each hit on the field pushed him closer to the operating table, and each operation pulled him back onto the turf. His spine was fused. He had numerous knee replacements, and eventually, due to repeated infections, he lost his right leg. All for the game he refused to leave behind. But what made Otto truly terrifying to opponents and inspiring to fans wasn't just his physical toughness. It was his mindset. He once said, "I was a gladiator. That's how I played. Every time I stepped on the field, I knew I could get hurt, but I didn't care. I just wanted to win." That wasn't a quote meant for headlines. It was the truth. Otto believed in pain as part of the profession. He didn't seek sympathy. He didn't show weakness. In fact, he wore a metal brace on each knee, a heavily padded neck roll, and a special helmet to protect his surgically repaired head. At a glance, he looked like a man stitched together just enough to keep going. And that's exactly what he did. The man's toughness was legendary, even in a league filled with warriors. Otto took on some of the fiercest defensive linemen of the era. Week after week, he snapped the ball, blocked ferocious rushes, and absorbed punishment. Players who faced him often left the field shaking their heads, wondering how he stayed standing. But he never gave them the satisfaction of seeing him fall. Otto's pain tolerance wasn't just physical, it was psychological. He played during a time when concussions were brushed off as getting your bell rung. Otto suffered over 20 concussions in his career, by his own count. And back then, there was no protocol, no tent, no evaluation. You got knocked out, and if you could walk, you went back in. Otto often did. He also kept quiet about his health issues long after retirement. For years, he struggled with infections, joint problems, and intense nerve pain. Eventually, doctors had to amputate his right leg due to complications, but Otto didn't complain. In interviews, he would shrug it off. "It's the price I paid to be a football player." It wasn't just Otto's body that was tested, it was his spirit. By the end of his life, he'd endured dozens of surgeries, walked with the help of crutches or a wheelchair, and fought through multiple infections. But he never expressed regret. He believed football gave his life meaning. He never blamed the game. His name is etched into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, not just because he was good, but because he was different. because no one, before or after, played the game quite like Jim Otto. He wore jersey number 00, a symbol that eventually became outlawed, but for Otto it was perfect. He was original, untouchable, inhuman even. Jim Otto was the kind of player who would have played in a Roman Colosseum, sword in hand, smiling at the crowd. He was the soul of the Raiders' early years, a man built from grit, powered by pain, and loyal to the end. He played through what would have broken most men, and he never once asked for mercy.
They called him the Assassin, not just for the way he played, but for the fear his name sparked long before the first snap. Jack Tatum didn't just hit people, he destroyed them. He was the Oakland Raiders' enforcer during the brutal 1970s era of the NFL, a time when rules were loose and violence was part of the game's soul. Tatum didn't back down. In fact, he charged forward. Standing 5'10" and weighing 200 pounds, he wasn't the biggest man on the field, but he hit like a truck. Every tackle seemed to echo through the stadium. Coaches, teammates, and opponents alike knew that if Tatum was in the secondary, receivers were in for punishment. He turned crossing routes into nightmares. Some wideouts would simply avoid the middle altogether when he was lurking. And if they didn't, they'd usually regret it. His most infamous moment came in 1978, during a preseason game against the New England Patriots. Darryl Stingley, a wide receiver known for his agility and heart, caught a pass just as Tatum charged in. The hit was explosive, shoulder to chest, helmet to helmet. Stingley dropped instantly, motionless on the field. The collision left him paralyzed from the chest down for the rest of his life. The NFL, at that time, had no targeting rules, no penalties for hits that would be considered illegal today. Technically, the play was legal, but morally, it was a storm. Stingley never walked again, and although Tatum never apologized publicly, something critics constantly pointed out, those close to him say he carried the weight of that moment for the rest of his life. He didn't visit Stingley in the hospital. They never spoke again. The silence between them became a second tragedy. Some say Tatum was cold, that he never showed remorse, but others argue he was hardened by a league that praised hits like that for decades. Jack once said, "I like to believe that my best hits border on felonious assault." That quote, often repeated in media, made him both legendary and controversial. But there was more beneath the surface than swagger. Tatum's career was filled with highlight reel moments. He played in 3 Pro Bowls, helped the Raiders win Super Bowl X, and was widely considered one of the most feared safeties of all time. His reputation wasn't just built on one tragic moment, it was reinforced over and over, every Sunday, with every punishing hit. Yet behind all that glory, his body was quietly paying the price. After retirement, Jack's health began to crumble. Years of hits, falls, and untreated injuries took a toll. He developed diabetes, a disease that, over time, led to severe complications. First, one leg was amputated, then the other. The man who once flew across the field with predator-like speed was confined to a wheelchair. The assassin had become the victim of his own battlefield. Still, Jack Tatum refused to let his image fade. He became an author, writing books about football, toughness, and the warrior mindset. In They Call Me Assassin, he doubled down on his old-school attitude. He defended his style of play, saying he never intended to hurt anyone, but that pain was part of the game. That's what he was taught. That's how he survived. The mental toll, however, was always there, if not fully visible to the public. Interviews became rarer, public appearances slowed. Behind the scenes, he was a man living with regret, pain, and isolation. Tatum passed away in 2010 due to a heart attack brought on by complications from diabetes. He was 61 years old. Today, Jack Tatum's name still divides football fans. To some, he was the ultimate Raider, fierce, fearless, and unrelenting. To others, he was the face of a violent era the NFL now tries to distance itself from. But there's no denying one truth. Jack Tatum risked everything, his health,
his reputation, and perhaps even his peace of mind, to play the game the only way he knew how: full speed, no mercy. In many ways, he didn't just represent the Raiders, he defined them. In the brutal world of 1980s football, pain was a given, but few knew it quite like Bob Chandler. A wide receiver with sharp instincts and unshakable focus, Chandler was known for his crisp routes and dependable hands. But in one unforgettable moment in 1981, everything changed. During a game that started like any other, Chandler took a hit so severe it sent shockwaves through the stadium and nearly ended his life. The collision came fast and violent. He was tackled in the open field, the defender's shoulder driving deep into his torso. At first, it looked like just another hard play. But within minutes, Chandler was gasping, pale, and losing consciousness. His spleen had ruptured. Blood was flooding into his abdomen. It wasn't just a football injury. It was a medical emergency. He was rushed to the hospital where surgeons fought to save his life. The internal bleeding was massive. Most players would be sidelined indefinitely. Some might never return to the field. But Bob Chandler wasn't like most players. Against all odds, and despite the warnings, he came back later that same season. He returned to the lineup, not just alive, but ready to take hits again. It wasn't just physical toughness, it was the mindset. Chandler knew the risks and still chose to step back onto the field. He risked everything, not for fame or records, but for the team and the game he loved. In a sport defined by sacrifice, Bob Chandler's story is a chilling reminder that every play carries a cost. Sometimes, your life hangs in the balance. Cliff Branch was more than fast. He was a blur in cleats. Before ever stepping onto an NFL field, he was already known for his world-class speed. In college, he competed as a sprinter at the University of Colorado and was clocked running the 100-yard in just over 9 seconds. That Olympic-level speed made him one of the most feared wide receivers of his era. When Branch joined the Raiders in 1972, defenses weren't ready. He didn't just outrun cornerbacks, he humiliated them. His routes were sharp, his cuts lightning quick, and once he broke free, he was gone. But with speed like his came risks. Cliff took some of the hardest hits imaginable. Defenders tried everything to slow him down: late tackles, head-on collisions, even targeting his knees. Every deep route was a gamble between glory and injury.
Branch paid the price. He battled multiple leg injuries during his career. The stress on his hamstrings, knees, and ankles was constant. Yet somehow, he never slowed. Even after crashes that would sideline most players, Cliff bounced back. His resilience was nearly as legendary as his speed. What made him even more dangerous was his timing. He didn't just run fast, he ran smart. Branch had a knack for finding holes in the defense right when his quarterback needed him. In big moments, he delivered. 3 Super Bowl rings and over 6,600 career receiving yards say it all. But beyond the stats was a man who risked his body week after week to stretch the field and break games wide open. For over a decade, Cliff Branch turned every snap into a foot race, and more often than not, he won. Dan Birdwell wasn't built like a modern defensive lineman. He wasn't flashy. He didn't care much for the spotlight. But what he lacked in fame, he made up for in fury. In the 1960s, Birdwell became one of the cornerstones of the Raiders' brutal defense, especially during their legendary 1967 season, the year they stormed to an AFL championship. Lining up as a defensive tackle, Birdwell was known for being relentless. He wasn't the biggest guy on the line, but he was one of the meanest. Teammates and opponents alike respected him, mostly because he played like every snap was a fight to survive. He once said, "You have to play this game like somebody just hit your mother with a 2x4. That one quote captured his entire mindset. He didn't just tackle, he exploded through linemen like he had a personal vendetta. What most fans didn't know was that Birdwell played much of his career while battling chronic health issues. Long before modern training and treatment, he fought through pain that would sideline most men today. And yet, he rarely missed a game. Bruised, aching, and sometimes sick, he just showed up and hit harder. In 1967, alongside other greats like Ben Davidson and Tom Keating, Birdwell helped lead one of the most fearsome defenses in the league. They crushed quarterbacks, stuffed runners, and struck fear into entire offenses. That year, the Raiders went 13-1 in the regular season, and Dan Birdwell was right in the heart of it. Unbreakable, unrelenting, and unstoppable. His story doesn't get told often, but when it is, it reminds fans what true toughness looks like. Not just strength, but grit through suffering. Birdwell gave everything he had, body, spirit, and soul for the game. Pete Banazak wasn't flashy. He didn't dance after touchdowns or throw the ball into the stands. But when the Oakland Raiders needed 1 yard, just one brutal, bone-crunching yard, they turned to him. Nicknamed Rooster for his scrappy toughness, Banazak made a name for doing the dirty work few others wanted. He dove headfirst into chaos, pushing through piles of defenders, absorbing hits that would leave most players gasping for breath. In Super Bowl XI, his hard-nosed style earned him 2 touchdowns, helping the Raiders crush the Minnesota Vikings. He didn't outrun anyone. He simply ran through them. He wasn't the fastest or the strongest, but in moments that demanded pure will, Pete was the answer. His most legendary moment, though, came during the infamous Holy Roller play in 1978. The clock was dying. The Raiders were desperate. Quarterback Stabler fumbled forward, intentionally, many believe. The ball bounced and rolled like it had a life of its own. Tight end Dive Casper kicked it closer to the goal line. And there was Banazak. Diving, scrambling, rolling, he made no attempt to pick up the ball. Instead, he slapped it forward, helping it inch toward destiny. Finally, Casper fell on it in the end zone. Touchdown. The play caused chaos across the league. It was controversial, even sneaky, but it was pure Raider football. Risky, gritty, and unforgettable. That moment led to a rule change. Today, no player can advance a fumble on 4th down in the final 2 minutes, all thanks to Pete and that wild finish. Jeff Barnes wasn't built like a typical linebacker. He didn't tower over offensive lines, he didn't flash like a headline star, but what he brought to the field was something every teammate respected and every opponent feared: relentless courage. Barnes joined the Raiders in 1977, a time when football still had rough edges. Over the next 10 years, he wore the silver and black like armor. He didn't just play through pain, he embraced it. Sprained joints, bruised ribs, lingering muscle tears, none of it stopped him from taking the field week after week. He didn't talk much about injuries. He saw them as part of the job. Known as a hard hitter and fearless tackler, Barnes was the kind of player who would leap into a fullback's path without hesitation. He never shied away from contact. If a gap opened, Barnes filled it, whether or not his body agreed. Opposing quarterbacks learned to look twice. Special teams saw him coming before the snap.
He was a key figure in 2 Super Bowl wins, including the legendary victory over the Redskins in Super Bowl XVIII. And though he didn't rack up flashy stats, his impact ran deeper than numbers. He set a tone, a presence on the field, a signal that someone was always watching, ready to pounce. Jeff Barnes wasn't the loudest man in the locker room, but when game day came, he transformed. Grit in his eyes, blood on his jersey, and a chip on his shoulder. A true Raider, through and through. Marcus Allen wasn't just a great running back. He was a legend, a Super Bowl MVP, a Heisman winner, a Hall of Famer. But behind the trophies and highlight reels was a brutal truth. Marcus Allen played in an era when the hits were harder, the rules were looser, and head injuries were simply part of the game. During the 1980s and early 1990s, the NFL had no real concussion protocol. Players were praised for toughness if they got up after a big hit, even when their vision blurred or their memory fogged.
Allen, with his shifty style and fearless cuts, took dozens of those hits every season. And he never complained. That was the Raider way. No excuses, no fear. But over time, the toll began to show. Though Allen has always carried himself with poise in public, he's spoken about the quiet damage, memory lapses, mental fog, and the silent worry that the long-term effects might still be waiting to surface. Unlike broken bones or torn ligaments, brain injuries don't show themselves right away. They creep in slowly, years later. In interviews, Allen hinted that he doesn't remember certain games or plays, not because he didn't care, but because the collisions were that violent. Back then, a ding to the head wasn't treated as a medical emergency. It was just another part of the game. Players were sent back in after smelling salts or a splash of cold water. Marcus Allen may have outrun defenders with grace and style, but even he couldn't dodge the hidden cost of head trauma. His story is more than one of glory. It's a reminder that every yard gained sometimes came at a price no one saw until much later. Andrew Walter came into the NFL with high hopes. A standout quarterback from Arizona State, he had the arm strength, the size, and the college stats to suggest he'd be a future star. Drafted by the Raiders in 2005, many thought he could be the answer the team had been searching for. But what followed was not just a series of losses, it was a mental collapse hidden in plain sight. Thrown into the fire too soon, Walter found himself behind one of the weakest offensive lines in the league. In 2006, he was sacked a staggering 46 times in just 8 starts. That kind of punishment doesn't just bruise the body, it starts to tear down the mind. Every snap became a countdown to the next hit. Every pass, a gamble. His mechanics suffered. His decision-making crumbled. The pressure wasn't just on the field, it was internal, building with each mistake, each missed opportunity. Unlike other chapters in Raider history filled with physical scars and bloody jerseys, Andrew Walter's story speaks to the unseen toll, the fear of failure, the noise of doubt, the psychological weight of carrying a broken team on your shoulders. Some called him a bust, but few understood the hostile environment he was thrown into, or the relentless strain of leading a team in chaos. Walter's brief career became a harsh reminder that in football, not all injuries bleed. Some fester in silence, where no camera can see. Not every Raider who risked it all was a star. Some never heard their names chanted in the stands, no jerseys sold, no headlines written. Yet, without them, the Raiders wouldn't have survived the darkest downs or fiercest rivalries. These were the underdogs, the quiet warriors buried deep in the roster. Take the practice squad players, for example. Week after week, they got crushed in drills to sharpen the starters. No glory, no game time, just bruises and sweat. Yet they showed up. Knowing one call-up could mean facing a 300-pound lineman on live television with zero warning. Then there were the special teams units, often treated like an afterthought. But in reality, they absorbed some of the most violent collisions in the game. One missed tackle could flip the scoreboard. One block could decide a season. They dove headfirst into chaos on every punt and kickoff, knowing their moment of glory might last only seconds. And what about the backups, especially the second and third string quarterbacks, running backs, or linemen? Sitting for weeks, sometimes years, then suddenly thrust into action with the weight of the franchise on their shoulders. Many didn't have time to warm up, but they ran into the fire anyway, driven by duty and pride. From shadowed sidelines to frontline chaos, every Raider who stepped on that field has risked something. Health, career, sometimes more. These unsung heroes may never have made the highlight reel, but they gave everything when called upon, and they wore the silver and black with the same fierce heart as any Hall of Famer. Courage, sacrifice, loyalty. These aren't just buzzwords. They're the very core of what it means to be a Raider. From the iron-willed legends like Jim Otto to the silent grinders on the practice squad, every player we explored today stepped on that field knowing the risks. They weren't just playing a game.
They were putting their bodies, their futures, even their lives on the line for something bigger than themselves. For pride, for team, for the silver and black. These men didn't just wear a uniform, they lived the Raider code. Their stories remind us that greatness isn't only measured in stats or Super Bowl rings. Sometimes it's found in broken bones, in unseen bruises, in the quiet decision to play hurt and fight on. These are not just athletes, they're warriors, and their legacy lives on far beyond the scoreboard. If these stories moved you, if they made you see the game in a different light, then don't leave without taking a moment to honor them. Like this video, share it with fellow fans, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel, History of Raiders, where we keep these forgotten stories alive. Until next time, we salute the fearless few who gave everything and wore the silver and black with honor.